last lecture we saw some heuristics for the flow shop scheduling problem. In this lecture we will address the job shop scheduling problem. So, as we mentioned earlier, in a job shop there are several jobs, let us say there are n jobs and there are m machines. Unlike a flow shop, each job has a unique route or a unique order of visit of the machine. For example, if there are 3 machines, one particular job may come here first, then visit this and leave, while some other job may start with this, visit this, come back to this and then leave. So, in a job shop each job has a pre-specified route or order of visit of the machine. It is also not absolutely necessary that all the jobs will visit all the machines. A job can visit a subset of the existing set of machines. So, let us explain the job shop scheduling problem using an example. So, in this example we are going to look at 3 jobs and 3 machines. So, let me call the 3 jobs as J1, J2 and J3. So, let us consider this particular example where there are 3 jobs and 3 machines. Each job has its own pre-specified route, which means job 1 will first visit machine 1, then visit machine 3 and then visit machine 2. It is like job 1 first visits machine 1, then visits machine 3, then visits machine 2 and goes out. Another job J2 may first visit machine 2 and then machine 1 and then machine 3. For example, J2 will first visit machine 2 and then it visits machine 1. The one that I have shown in yellow essentially stands for J2, first visits machine 2, then visits machine 1, then visits machine 3 and then leaves. Now, the numbers shown in the brackets are the processing times for the particular job on the particular machine. Now, let us try and get a make span for a particular schedule and let us draw a schedule to solve this particular problem. So, what we do first is we make a chart where we are now going to show all the 3 machines on this chart. So, let us say this is machine M1, this is machine M2 and this would be machine M3 on this chart. Now, what we do is we let each job go and stand in front of its first machine. So, J1 will go and stand in front of M1. So, J1 will be here, J2 will go and stand in front of M2. So, J2 will be here, J3 also will go and stand in front of M1, J3 will be here. Now, we are at time equal to 0, all the jobs are available and each job is now waiting or standing in front of its first machine to be processed. So, if we look at machine M2 at time equal to 0, job J2 is standing in front of M2, there is only one job waiting in front of M2. So, job J2 can be loaded on M2. So, it starts processing on M2 at time equal to 0, finishes at time equal to 6, because it requires 6 time units, and at time equal to 6 it will leave M2 and come to M1 for further processing, which we show here as J2 coming here at time equal to 6. Now, at time equal to 0, M3 does not have any job in front of it, so M3 will remain idle. Now, we have to look at M1. There are 2 jobs waiting in front of M1 at time equal to 0. We have to choose only one of them for processing, because a machine can do only one job at a time. Now, J1 requires 7 units of time, J3 requires 8 units of time. So, we would be inclined ordinarily to choose J3 ahead of J1 or J1 ahead of J3, because J1 has lesser processing time compared to J3. So, we now follow a rule and say that rule choose job with smallest processing time. Or use SPT rule. We have already seen the SPT rule. So, let us assume that if we have to choose between 2 jobs or among a set of jobs that are waiting, we would pick a job which has the smallest processing time. So, between J1 and J3 here, J1 requires 7 units of time, J3 requires 8 units of time. So, we choose J1. So, J1 will start at 0, finish at time equal to 7, and at time equal to 7 will now move to M3. So, it will come here. So, J1 at time equal to 7. Now, we have to look at 2 issues at this point. Now, in this particular example, we had 2 jobs waiting, J1 and J3, and we decided to choose one amongst the jobs waiting based on shortest processing time. So, when we apply this rule, there is no tie, because J1 requires 7 units, J2 requires 8 units. Clearly, J1 is chosen based on the rule. But if we had a situation where this was also 7, then 2 jobs would have been waiting and both of them have the same processing time. Therefore, if we apply the rule, there is a tie. So, if there is a tie, we need a tie breaking rule also, and we need to define a tie breaking rule also. Now, right now there is no tie. So, the tie will happen when you apply your first rule, and after applying the first rule you still have more than one candidate, in which case we need to define a tie breaking rule and use the tie breaking rule to choose the jobs that are in the tie. Second issue is this: we are at t equal to 0. At t equal to 0, we realize that J1 and J3 were waiting. J1 requires 7, J3 requires 8. So, we picked J1 ahead of J3. At the same time, we also have an additional information that J2 is going to come at 6 here. But then one look at the table, we realize that J2 actually requires only 4 units of time. So, the question is, will we leave out J2 in the choice and choose between J1 and J3, because they are waiting at time equal to 0. J2 has lesser processing time, but in order to take J2 ahead of J1 or J3, the machine will have to be idle for some more time. So, we always make a decision that we will not keep a machine idle if there are jobs waiting in front of it. So, another rule is do not keep a machine idle when there are jobs waiting in front of it. Therefore, we will not consider that J2 is going to come after 6 minutes when we make a decision here at time equal to 0. So, at time equal to 0, we will see what is available and then make a decision accordingly. Now, we go back and see that up to time equal to 6 or up to time equal to 7, machine 1 is busy, machine 2 is busy up to time equal to 6, machine 3 does not have anything except at time equal to 7 it can start J1. So, the clock shifts to time equal to 6 now. So, at time equal to 6 M1 is busy, at time equal to 6 M2 is free, but there is no job waiting. At time equal to 6 M3 is still idle and there is no job in front of it. So, the clock shifts to time equal to 7 where on M1 we have J3 waiting, we also have J2 waiting. So, J3 requires 8 units of time, J2 requires 4 units of time. So, based on the shortest processing time rule, we would choose J2 ahead of J3 even though J3 came earlier. The rule that we use consistently is to choose the one with the smallest processing time. So, we would choose J2. So, we start J2 at 7, takes another 4 units. So, at 11 J2 is completed. At 11 J2 is completed, J2 will go to M3 at time equal to 11. Now, once again at time equal to 7, M2 does not have any job in front of it. Now, at time equal to 7, M3 has J1 in front of it. So, it starts J1. So, J1 on M3 is another 8. So, 7 plus 8, 15. So, J1 finishes at 15, finishes on M3 at 15 and goes to M2 at 15. So, J1 comes at 15. Now, the clock moves to time equal to 11. At time equal to 11, only J3 is waiting in front of M1. So, we start J3, J3 requires 8 units. So, 11 plus 8, 19. So, at time equal to 19, J3 completes on M1 and comes to M2. So, at 19, J3 comes here. Now, the clock moves to time equal to 15. At time equal to 15, J2 is available here. So, we take J2 for processing. J2 on M3 is another 12. So, 15 plus 12, 27. So, J2 finishes at 27 on M3. So, J2 completes at 27. So, at time equal to 27, J2 has finished its last job on M3. Now, once again we are at time equal to 15, J1 is available here, and as I mentioned earlier, we will not look at the presence of J3 at 19. because we follow this rule that we will not keep a machine idle waiting for something to happen. So, at this point we will take J1. So, J1 on M2 is another 10. So, 15 plus 10, 25 J1. So, J1 has completed processing on M2 at 25. So, J1 finishes at 25. Now, once again we have J3 has come here at 19. Now, we are at 25. J3 is waiting on M2, takes another 8. So, 25 plus 8, 33. So, J3 finishes at 33 here, and then at 33 J3 comes to J3 comes at 33. So, at 33 J3 is the only one available here, takes another 7 units of time. So, starts at 33 and finishes at 40. So, J3 finishes at 40. So, all the jobs are completed at time equal to 40. So, the make span for this schedule is 40. So, now we can write that make span is 40, total completion time is 27 plus 25 is 52 plus 40 92. Now, if each job has a due date, and if the due date for the jobs are say 25, 30 and 35, then this is completion time. So, this is tardy with tardiness equal to 2, this is early, this is tardy with tardiness equal to 5. So, sigma Tj total tardiness will be 7. Number of tardy jobs Nj will be 2, because this is tardy, this is also tardy. Maximum tardiness, which is usually called L max, will be equal to 5, because the due date is 35, completion time is 40. Now, if we want to keep the utilization of these machines, so till time equal to 40 the shop is busy. So, this takes 19 out of 40. So, utilization of M1 can be shown as 19 by 40. Utilization here would be the time taken on M2, which is 10 plus 6, 16 plus 8, 24 by 40. The utilization on M3 is 8 plus 12, 20 plus 7, 27 by 40. If we want the idle times, this is idle for 21 time units, this is idle for 16 time units, and this is idle for 13 time units. So, the moment we get a chart like this, we will be able to evaluate all the objectives. The objectives that we have evaluated are make span, total completion time or mean completion time, and for assumed due dates the total tardiness. We can also look at total earliness, only this job is early, so earliness is 5, total tardiness is 7, number of tardy jobs 2, number of early job 1, maximum tardiness is 5, utilizations, idle times. So, all possible objectives we can evaluate once we draw this chart. Now, this chart is called the Gantt chart, named after Henry Gantt, who first proposed a chart or a pictorial representation of a schedule. So, the Gantt chart can be drawn for a given rule like the SPT rule. Now, these rules on which we draw the Gantt chart are these rules using which we will choose one job out of the available jobs for processing are called dispatching rules. It is very customary and very commonly used practice that we use dispatching rules to try and draw the Gantt chart. Once the dispatching rule is decided, the Gantt chart will be the same if more than one person works on the Gantt chart. So, we first define a dispatching rule, and then if necessary we have to define a tie breaking rule. As mentioned earlier, right in the beginning, if both J1 and J3 they had 7 and 8, if both of them had 7 and 7, then the shortest processing time rule would not be able to get a unique job from the jobs waiting. So, there will be a tie. Now, those ties are broken by what are called tie breaking rules. A commonly used tie breaking rule could be first in first out or lowest subscript. In this case, J1 would be seen as a job with the lowest subscript and so on. So, depending on the dispatching rule and the tie breaking rule, the Gantt chart is defined, and Gantt chart is an extremely efficient and intuitive way to draw a schedule. But this schedule need not be optimum with respect to make span or with respect to any other performance measure. Gantt chart is essentially an evaluative tool. Given a dispatching rule, we are now able to show pictorially how the schedules will look like, with absolutely no guarantee for optimality. If the dispatching rule changes, then this Gantt chart will also change. We also look at when we used two things consistently. The first thing was the rule, which we now defined as a dispatching rule. The second principle that we used consistently was that we would not keep a machine idle if there are jobs waiting in front of it, with the hope that some other job that comes later, if that is processed, we may be able to optimize the objective. We will not follow that principle, which we wrote here, which we also used here. For example, we did not consider this J2 when we made a decision to choose J1 here. Now, schedules where this particular rule is used are called non-delay schedules. We will not deliberately create a delay so that we can optimize on the performance measure further. And in general, non-delay schedules perform better than delay schedules, where delays are intentionally introduced. From a practical point of view, non-delay schedules are important and are used. Now, as mentioned earlier, depending on the dispatching rule, the Gantt chart can be created, and there are several dispatching rules that are available which one can use to create Gantt charts. So, let us see some dispatching rules which are commonly practiced. We also have categories of dispatching rules. So, the first category are processing time based. Now, the rule that we used to create this Gantt chart is called shortest processing time rule. So, the first rule that is based on processing time is the shortest processing time rule, also called SPT rule. Now, if we can draw a chart using the SPT rule, we can also draw a chart using the LPT rule. For example, we chose between J1 and J3, we chose J1 first here based on SPT, but based on LPT we could have chosen J3 and the schedule would have looked very different. So, if SPT is a good rule, LPT by itself is not a bad rule. If SPT will try and give a good make span, it does not mean LPT will give a very long make span. LPT in its own way will also try to get a good value of the make span. So, SPT is also a rule that is often used. Now, we could consider instead of SPT, we could have considered, for example, we had to choose between J1 and J3. Now, let me look at what is the total processing time on J1. 7 plus 8, 15 plus 10, 25, 6 plus 4, 10 plus 12, 22. So, total processing time, I am sorry, 8 plus 8, 16 plus 7, 23, 8 plus 7, 15 plus 10, 25. So, total processing times are 25 and 23. So, if we used what is called STPT, shortest value of total processing time, we could have picked J3 ahead of J1. So, STPT is another rule that we can think of, shortest total processing time. Similarly, if STPT is a rule, then LTPT can be another rule. Choose the job which has the largest value of the total processing time. Many times we also do another thing. For example, let us say we were here, okay. So, in this chart we are not able to encounter that situation except in the front, but let us have a situation where somewhere in the middle, let us assume that we are in a particular machine, let us say we are here and a particular job has just finished processing, let us say J2 has just finished processing here. Now, let us assume that J1 has come at this point and J3 has come at this point. Now, which means we have to apply a dispatching rule to choose between J1 and J3, to choose one of them. Now, let us assume that in this case J1 has a total processing time of 25, but when J1 has come here, it has finished 7 and J1 requires a remaining 18 processing time, including the machine that I have. Whereas, if I look at J2 when it comes there, let us say this is machine M2. When J1 has come to M2, J1 has already finished M1 and including M2, J1 has 18 units of time to go. When J3 comes here on M2, J3 has a total of 23, it has already finished 16, it has 7 to go including the current processing time. So, this has 7 to go including the current processing time, this has 18 to go including the current processing time. This has a total of 25, but let us assume it is visiting M3 after it has finished M1. So, it has finished 7. So, the remaining processing time for J1 including the current machine is 18, whereas when J3 comes to M3, it has already finished 16. So, the remaining one including the current is 7. So, you could choose a job based on shortest remaining processing time, where remaining includes the current processing time. So, you could have SRPT and you could have LRPT, longest remaining processing time, where remaining includes the current processing. So, these are some examples of processing time based dispatching rules. Now, other rules based on number of operations. In this particular example, we had chosen 3 jobs and all 3 jobs visited all 3 machines. It is not necessary for all the jobs to visit all the machines. Now, suppose we had a situation where this one was not there, then J1 visits 3 machines, J3 visits 2 machines. So, J1 requires 3 operations, J3 requires 2 operations. So, one could choose J3 based on minimum total operations. So, you could have minimum total operations, minimum NOP, minimum number of operations. You could use maximum number of operations as 2 different dispatching rules. Similarly, we could use minimum number of remaining operations. For example, when we went back to the earlier situation, when we are looking at visit of say J1 and J3 on M3, when J1 visits M3, it requires 2 more operations, whereas when J3 visits M3, it requires 1 more operation. So, you could look at minimum remaining number of operations and maximum remaining number of operations. These are not processing time based, but these are number of operations based methods. Then we can look at due date based methods. One of course is the earliest due date. The second is called slack. Slack equal to due date minus current time minus remaining processing time. For example, right here, to choose between J1 and J3, current time is 0, due date for J1 is 30. So, due date 30 minus current time 0, 30 minus remaining processing time is 7 plus 8, 15 plus 10, 25. So, slack is 5 for J1. Now, for J3, due date is 35, current time is 0, total time is 23. So, slack is 12. So, based on minimum slack, J1 can be taken. Slack represents the extra time that is available, which acts like a slack or a buffer or a cushion to try and meet the due date. So, that job which has the least slack will have to be taken first. So, you could look at least slack rule. Another commonly used rule is called minimum slack by remaining number of operations. I have a slack of 5, I may have only 1 more operation to go. I may have another situation where I have a slack of 8, but I have 2 more operations to go. So, 8 by 4 will be 2 or 8 by 2 will be 4 versus 5. So, the other one can be taken. So, we compute the slack and then we see how many more operations are to go. So, divide the slack by the remaining number of operations and then choose the minimum of slack by remaining number of operations. Then we have a set of rules which are very common rules, which are neither or none of the above, one would say, neither processing time based nor due date based. General rules. So, first is first come first served or first in first out, they mean the same, first in first out, last in first out. The one that came first will be taken, the one that came last will be taken. So, first in first out, last in first out. One could use some kind of a random rule, just pick the job randomly out of the jobs that are available. So, these are examples of popularly used dispatching rules. Sometimes we could have other combination rules, where we could think in terms of some alpha into SPT plus some beta into LPT, where we could have weights, we could have weighted combinations and so on. We could have priorities, we could have all of them. So, a simple example would be to weigh the processing times, or we could use, can't use alpha SPT plus beta LPT, but we could use alpha into remaining processing time plus beta into remaining number of operations, or beta into total processing time. That can be a combination rule. So, we could have rules like this. Now, out of these so many rules, it is also a common practice to essentially look at SPT, first in first out, and EDD to single them out as three extremely popular dispatching rules. Now, these three rules are very common, easily understandable and easily implementable. When we know that certain number of jobs are here, it is very intuitive that we choose the one which has the smallest processing time. Similarly, intuitively we choose the one that came in first, and if we have an idea of the due date, we would intuitively choose the job or activity that has the earliest due date. So, when we really want to put this to use, the Gantt chart based schedule generation to be put to use in a flow shop or in a shop floor, the most convenient thing to do is to use one of these three rules and then draw the Gantt chart and make a schedule. So, if this schedule goes to an operator who is working on a machine, say let us say we are looking at the operator who is working on say M3. Now, based on this schedule, we will tell the operator that at time equal to 7, J1 will come, put J1 in, at time equal to 11, J2 will come, put J2 as soon as you finish J1, and then J3 will come later and put it in. Now, in this particular schedule, there is no dispatching rule on this machine, whereas if we are looking at the operator on M1, we have to tell the operator that this is your schedule. Even though J1 and J3 are coming first, you take J1 based on SPT, then you will use J2 even though it came later, and then you use J3. That is one way of explaining it or giving this. The other is to say, when you have to make a decision, choose based on the one that has the shortest processing time. So, it is extremely easy for the operator to implement. In practice, there could be situations where there can be slight delays. For example, J1 that requires 7 units of time may not actually reach M3 at 7. It may reach M3 at 8 or little later than 7 and so on. But then the operator also will not be very specifically bound by these numbers, but the operator will be very specifically bound by the rule using which he or she can pick a job and put it on the machine. So, when we use very common rules like SPT or EDD or first in first out, the Gantt chart becomes usable and anyone can understand the Gantt chart and appreciate the consistency with what is actually happening in practice. But when we make these, then this conflict comes as to the next question is, we also mentioned that this particular Gantt chart based on the SPT rule need not give us the optimum solution all the time. Now, we have listed about 6 plus 4, 10, 13, 16, 17 rules. There are actually hundreds of rules that are there. And today, with the amount of computerization and use of information technology devices, it is possible to write a program that will generate the Gantt chart. It is also possible for the user to define a dispatching rule, which is either one of those listed here or another dispatching rule, and it is easy to get the corresponding Gantt chart very quickly. Now, the question is, if SPT Gantt chart gives us a solution with 40, and let us assume that we are using slack by remaining number of operations as another rule, or we are using an 0.5 times RPT plus 0.5 times TPT as a dispatching rule, and we are able to get a solution with 38, say make span of 38, then from an optimization point of view 38 is better than 40. But from implementation point of view, 40 would be a little easier to implement on the shop floor because it is easy to understand and use. So, the question is, do we emphasize on advanced or more complicated or more involved rules if they can provide better make span, or are we content and happy with commonly used rules like SPT, FIFO and EDD, because they are easy to implement and the person implementing will not make a mistake in implementation. So, the answer to that comes in the amount of training and the amount of education that is provided to the people who do the job. If people who do the job can understand and appreciate the role of these dispatching rules and the fact that a slightly involved dispatching rule like minimum of slack over remaining number of operations can give a solution which is lesser than this, and if people are aware, educated and are ready to use, then it will be an advantage to use involved dispatching rules as long as the performance measure is optimized. But if on the other hand the organization is comfortable with the use of simpler and well known dispatching rules like SPT or EDD or FIFO, which is more commonsensical, then the organization could use such rules and try and schedule the jobs in the job shop that is being looked at. The other advantage, as I had mentioned, with the Gantt chart based scheduling and the Gantt chart based dispatching rule is that these are evaluative in nature. With a single Gantt chart schedule, we can evaluate each and every one of the objectives. The positive thing is the efficient pictorial representation, easy to understand, ability to evaluate a variety of objectives. The not so positive thing is the fact that it is simply dependent on a particular rule and it does not depend on a particular objective function. Therefore, while it has the ability to evaluate all objective functions, it perhaps also has the lack of ability to optimize a particular objective function because it was not based on a particular objective function. Therefore, the ability to guarantee optimality is also very less, and job shop scheduling is a very hard problem. If we look at now in this particular example, there were 3 machines and each machine has all the 3 jobs visiting. So, every machine if all the n jobs visit every machine, so for each machine the n jobs can be arranged in n factorial ways, and since there are m machines, we can have a total of n factorial to the power m possible alternatives in schedules. So, n factorial to the power m is a very large number, and job shop scheduling problems are known to be very hard problems. So, though dispatching rule is a very convenient way or method to solve job shop scheduling, its ability to give optimal solutions is actually not very good. But over a period of time, people have been using dispatching rules to try and get Gantt charts, and with more and more computerization happening and perhaps more and more dispatching rules available, one could program or use these dispatching rules into a software and then try out several alternative dispatching rules to try and optimize the performance measure, like a make span or a tardiness or whatever, and then use it accordingly by training the people. Now, we have also looked at one aspect of job shop scheduling, which is called a static job shop. Static job shop assumes that the number of jobs that we are going to do is known. So, in this example there are only 3 jobs. So, the planning period or the planning horizon will end as soon as all the 3 jobs are completed. Therefore, from a Gantt chart schedule it is possible to compute a make span, because the point at which all the 3 jobs are over will be the make span. In real time, job shops are not static in nature. Jobs keep coming, jobs keep arriving. So, when jobs keep arriving, then we can make certain variants to it. Now, and we also made an assumption here that all the jobs are available at time equal to 0, which is not a valid assumption in practice. So, in practice, jobs keep coming dynamically. So, we have to move from what are called static job shops to dynamic job shops, where the jobs can come at any time, and the time at which the jobs are going to enter the system is not known a priori. When the time at which the jobs enter the system is known a priori, then it becomes static job shop with release times, which are usually called Rj, where Rj is the release time for job j. So, in dynamic job shops, we do not know what time the jobs are going to be released into the system. So, in dynamic job shops, there is also no end to the jobs coming in. So, there is no make span concept in a dynamic job shop. Dynamic job shops are essentially concerned with other measures like flow time or completion time, tardiness, number of tardy jobs, and so on. Dynamic job shops do not consider make span. We could also model job shops with release times or known release times, which is called Rj. So, this gives us a complete view of certain aspects of what is called static job shop scheduling. Most static job shop scheduling is concerned with the use of dispatching rules, based on which we draw Gantt charts and then we evaluate all the objectives. The limitation, of course, is the lack of optimality or the inability to give the optimum solution to either make span or any objective for a static problem. Static problem implies number of jobs are known, the inability to give the optimum solution. Now, if we want to focus on the optimum solution, then we need to look at other methods such as mathematical programming and so on, and the problem also becomes very hard to try and get to the optimal solution. So, the next question that comes is, while dispatching rules are very good to try to give us solutions which are implementable, which are easy to understand? Are there other heuristic methods or other methods which may not be based on dispatching rules, but can they also be used to try and get solutions to the job shop scheduling problem? For example, can we have other heuristic methods other than dispatching rule based methods which may give us a value less than 40? One such method is called the shifting bottleneck heuristic, which follows an entirely different approach to solving the job shop scheduling problem. So, we will look at the shifting bottleneck heuristic in the next lecture.